Hello my friends, I'm Rick and this is your seat at the table, and we are looking at a PDF of Major Periphery States, or the Major Periphery States Handbook. It's a really nice print. I really like that coverage. It really kind of gives you some variety of taste on what we're dealing with. The Periphery States have always been an interesting and fun addition to BattleTech, and I think most players, and this is just from conversations and listening into other people's conversations for years, that most players have a favored periphery power, and most of them would like to see more stories and more things set in the periphery, amongst the periphery, and so on and so forth. And even though we don't get it, and Catalyst does a good job of tossing the bones out. And actually, in the last few years, they've really stepped up. We've seen the periphery. You can go back the past decade. The periphery has become far more involved in the inner sphere politics and confrontations and conflicts and stuff than they ever have in the past, which shows you that the writers and designers and head people up there at Catalyst are listening to the players and are trying to appease them in as many ways as possible, while acknowledging that at the end of the day, as popular as the periphery is, that doesn't sell as well as the major factions do. It just is kind of the way it is. But if you look at it, and every generation or so, every so many years, we get a new version or a new era of handbooks and manuals and things like this. So this is the early Jihad, late FedCom Civil War era, 3063-ish or something like that. This is a 3067, okay? So, as things go, we're still quite a ways away from where we are in the current era, 3150 or whatever. So a lot has changed. I was trying to see what year, I don't see. Oh, there's a damn title page here somewhere with all this information and crap on it, but I don't know where it's at, or I'm just not seeing it. And I was looking to see what the published date for this particular source book was. And once again, this is a PDF that was graciously given to me by one of you guys, one of my subscribers. A number of you have done this for me a few times, and I'm utterly grateful for it, because it really expands my knowledge and information of BattleTech. Many items that I were unable to buy or acquire at the time they came out, and the reason I would interested to know what year this was published by Catalyst, because I know Catalyst took over as I don't know exact what year it was that Fan Pro WizKids rolled over into the Catalyst, or was replaced by Catalyst. And so I don't know if this was something Catalyst went back. They're trying to tie up the knots, because as we all well know, after FASA bellied up and this Fan Pro WizKid thing came into play, there was a lot of stuff that went down or didn't go down. There was a lot of unfinished business, and the Eris basically took a major leap forward, which reset the setting character-wise and story-wise for for WizKids and for Fan Pro at the time, which is mostly WizKids, because of their Dark Age push. But Fan Pro had tried to fill in the gaps, and Catalyst has done a crack job, a really good job, of going back and filling in the missing stuff and trying to stitch everything together as best they can. Obviously, some things are going to change. Wording and editorial work always has its effect, and of course era change. So we're currently, our societal ideas today are quite different, and I loathe to use the term woke because it's so brutally misused today, and the concept that they're thinking is anyway. So when we look at the periphery as of 3067, and the Compelling Confederation has really done a good job of bringing the periphery into the inner sphere for their own personal reasons. Chancellor Sun Zhao really was savvy in that aspect. And the fact that the Canopans have become so deeply involved between the Capellans and the Duchy of Andria, the fact that they haven't really suffered heavily. They've benefited from the inclusion of their military forces, having engaged in things like Operation Serpent and some other internal conflicts and against the Smoke Jaguars and other clans, and then later in tandem sending units to support the Confederation and its endeavors and its goals, has allowed the Canopus, the Magistracy to military forces to get some much needed experience, their commanders to become more blooded and more savvy with modern technology and modern tactics and things like dealing with the clans. So this has benefited them. Economically speaking, it's also benefited them. The Magistracy has been probably unique among all the periphery powers as to have really gone untouched, strategically speaking, on their front. We know the Taurians had internal dissent in a portion of the Taurian. The Taurians broke off to form a second lesser state, and then they got involved with the Word of Blake and the Jihad, and some more additional problems came along, and so the Taurian Concordat is currently struggling, but they're gaining ground. From the current inversion in the 3150 era is that they're about to, not too far away from reconstitute. So their breakaway, the Cauldron Protectorate or whatever, is looking to be reabsorbed into the greater Concordat and return to the fold, if you will, through a planned marriage. And this would see them regain some more additional stability and strength in their era. Then we go to the next largest periphery power, of course, and that's the Outworlds Alliance. And the Outworld Alliance has always been mediocre at best, except for their aerospace assets. They really are, if anybody truly wanted to conquer them, they would have been conquered a long time ago. It's just that there wasn't a whole lot there that anybody wanted, and the amount of effort and time and distance it goes to deal with it, it left them alone. And then the Snow Ravens came along, and they made their alliance, which basically means the Snow Ravens took over and are running show. This really takes and gives the Outworlds a major boost, major shot, both from technologically speaking, but also in expanding their industrial base and their technical knowledge, which was woefully lacking in the past. This brings us to the quote bandit kingdoms, and like the Marian Hegemony really doesn't qualify as a bandit kingdom anymore. It is a minor faction still, yes, but it's a growing faction, and it's not unlike the other periphery powers. So it's its own state by all means. This bad idea of this misplanned adventurism into the Free Worlds League is going to not end well for them, and so far it hasn't. But at the same time, it's just they have grown and they've become more potent. They're definitely still struggling with growing pains, but I think they've moved beyond the idea of being a periphery bandit kingdom. And because there's plenty of other examples of existing bandit kingdoms, and we use that term loosely because there are some let's call them free ports. There's some free ports in the periphery that are not claimed by anybody but themselves, and though you could argue that they're a haven of pirates, they're not a pirate haven, and they're pretty horrific, don't get me wrong. Astroscopy, or whatever it's called, Astroscopy, I cannot pronounce that damn place, but it is a real wretched den of villain and villainy, or whatever, you know how it goes. So, yeah. What, and on a little slight tangent related to this stuff, one of the things that I'm really surprised is, considering how many centuries have passed, that we haven't seen even more minor periphery powers come into existence, and stay. This is not to say that they didn't have them. They didn't happen. I mean, we have evidence that this does happen. It probably happens quite frequently that these little entities, these little pocket kingdoms arise. They get put together. They hold together for one generation, maybe two, and then they fall apart and disappear. And they go back to their contingent individual lone wolf states and whatever. So space is vast. And BattleTech has barely touched the damn galaxy when it comes to space. It's really a small speck in the great scheme of how big and how much space is out there. Now, there's a lot of conjecture, a lot of commentary that, for whatever reason, the planetary systems, the solar systems beyond the periphery as we know it now, in current settings for the periphery boundaries and the periphery states, are really resource poor, lacking in habitable or even marginally habitable worlds on a vast number, and I find that questionable. I'm sure that there's something to be said. There's a case there. We know that at the height of the Outworlds Alliance, the Outworlds Alliance was over 100 plus inhabited planets, over about 60 systems or something like that. And over the centuries since the fall of the Star League, they've been reduced to about a third of their original size. And they have what they call the outback wastes or something. So there's a whole area beyond their periphery border, their current periphery border, that used to be part of the alliance, and it means there's still habitable systems out there, and none of them very large or very powerful that we know of. But it still doesn't mean that there couldn't possibly be more out there. And from a writer's perspective, from the game perspective, I understand. I mean, they got more than their share of things in the fire and stuff on the plate and back burner and God knows how many things sitting on the shelf that they never get unpacked. But so to see that they haven't add yet another layer of stuff. I just think that we know so little about what we do know out there, and that's by intent and design, which is fine. And yet, I think the game expansion possibility is still out there. I don't see any reason why we can't have new little kingdoms pop up. So once in a blue moon, I'll get a player group, and they'll like, well, we'll just start our own damn kingdom. And I'll point that out. I said, sure, there's vast areas outside. We could just go outside the areas of the Magistracy of Canopus, for example. And so the big bad power would be the Magistracy of Canopus. And your little micro state that would become considered abandoned kingdom by everybody else probably for the next 150, 200 years until it reaches a certain point. What's the breakoff point? 10 habitable systems, 10 planets under their control, 5, 15? There's that. So we have these tiny periphery powers that are only a couple planets or a couple systems, and they've been around for hundreds of years, but they haven't expanded or grown, in part because they don't have the resources, they don't have the money and the manpower, they just don't have the desire to do it. The minority is the Mica minority, and a handful of resource-rich planets that are really crappy places to live, and that's it. And nobody's bothered to go beyond that. Well, maybe there are no other suitable planets within a jump or two from their current location. Or maybe there's a lot more shit going on. I mean, it's hard to say. Well, this particular book, and they go back and they rehash the history and they do a rewrite of the history. And without setting down with the couple periphery books I already have that predate this that I have, and picking a section and comparing, doing due diligence, which I'm not inclined to do. I'm always of the opinion that every time a new book comes out that's built upon an existing or older set of books or series of books. So we'll look at all the handbooks as an example. So the House Leal handbook that came out originally, the one that set the groundwork for the House Leal, and that as we know it. And since then, there's been the field manual. There's been 2 field manuals, a combat manual, and 2 or 3 handbooks. And the existing handbooks are building upon the stuff from previous books. So we already know how the system works, how the politics works, religion works, things like this, based on the original handbook. And did they just carbon copy that material to a newer book, or did they rewrite it? Did they leave out things they didn't think was important because it's already established and we don't need to keep rehashing it? Or are we retconning things? Are we fixing past mistakes, or changing the narrative so narrative is more in line with the current system, the current social and lore-based understanding of the game? It's hard to say, right? It's hard for me to be able to say one way or another. But I still can't help but think every time a new book comes out, they've rewritten the material to not necessarily changed, but improved upon it. And that's just my thoughts on it. So we see, like I said, we see the Magistracy of Canopus is really gaining some from its connections with the Confederation and benefiting from it. And the Taurian Concordat's had its ass handed to it by itself. And it couldn't be defeated by its opposing an outside force, but its internal forces tear itself apart. And it was in part response because what they were engaging in working as some kind of detente out with the Magistracy of Canopus to exploit the worlds in between the two, and they created that buffer region that they put all these quote marshals out there, mech warrior marshals out there to defend it or to help take care of things, and then the place decides to break away from both of them and goes independent and causes all kinds of problems, right? So we got the Front reaches rebellion. I know, all right? Who gives a shit? It's okay. Birth of the Frank reaches, Crimson Council, Magistracy of Canopus, and like I said, we'll see how that goes out, because traditionally in BattleTech, everybody does well until they don't, and then they take a big heart fall. And Canopus has been doing real well for the last 120 years compared to everybody else. That it's almost either that's been overlooked, or that's just the way it's played out. Or they're due to have a shakeup, right? And it's hard to say how that'll play out. I think that it wouldn't surprise me if we don't eventually see a major conflict break out between the Magistracy and the Duchy of Andria, because while they're tentatively allies, and in some cases, I think one of the Centrella, what's her name, married the Duke, one of the Humphreys, and so on and so forth, to try to further meld the realms. But you're never going to merge. It's just the Andrians have been so hell bent on being an independent power for most of their existence that they're naturally inclined to not want to do that. And the Canopans are the same way. The Magistracy has been, almost 700, 600 and some years of history doing it their way, how they want to do their way. So we'll see how it goes. But considering the Humphreys and Andrea's history, I fully damn well expect there to be a open major conflict between them and the Canopans at some point down the road. Just because. It's just like the Compellants. So far, the Magistracy has been fortunate that they weren't absorbed by the Compellants. I'm sure the Compellants had thought about it. I mean, more than a few times that they looked at that way. But there's something about a willing partner better than a forced one. So, I mean, how do you want to look at it? The Outworlds Alliance. I mean, I look at, like I said, the Taurian Concordat. I've always liked the Taurian Concordat, mostly because of the meme, hippity hoppity, get off my property. But more importantly, because they're where the inner sphere could be, and there's so much good going on out here in the Concordat than bad, and their biggest worst enemy is themselves. And I've said that for a long time, and the fact that the internal problems caused them to be basically torn apart is not surprising. The first time they really get in deep with a major inner sphere faction, i.e. Word of Blake, they end up coming out regretting it. But their next primary boogeyman has always been the Federated Sons. And in truth, the lion's share of First Princes and of the Federated Sons have absolutely no interest whatsoever in the Concordat. And invading them, no, that's not on their plate. They got enough on their plate, and they're fat as it is. They got so many systems now they can't manage half of them anyway because of the logistics issues, mainly the lack of jump ships. So no, the Concordat's making its own boogeyman, and to the point of extreme paranoia that's developed, that's been a detriment to their society and to their mostly to their ruler for way too long. They eventually will, if they ever get themselves somebody sitting there running the show who doesn't view the Federated Sons as a half-sleeping dragon waiting to eat them, and things will be just fine, right? We'll see. I expect them. The Concordat's on a way to rebuilding itself now, and I expect it to resume its position the way it was before in the periphery, mostly keeping to itself and doing its own thing. It's like the Outworlds Alliance. The Outworlds Alliance, man, the addition of the Snow Ravens really changes some things. Like I said, really improves the fortunes of the Alliance and its technical base, its knowledge base, and it seems to be working well. What the final outcome for this is going to end up is yet to be seen. Because we don't know what the Alliance's civilian leadership thinks of the Ill Clan, or this Ill Clan concept, or this idea that maybe the third rendition of the Star League is now being reborn, and somehow they're going to be pulled into it. Generally speaking, like most of the periphery powers, they are adverse to being joining the inner sphere, especially something even remotely reeking of, quote, a Star League. So there might be a problem if the Snow Ravens decide to bend a knee to their Ill Clan and accept Alec Lord for that position, and the Wolves as being the ultimate leaders of the clans now, or the opposite. In either case, I don't see that being a good thing. Excuse me, for the Outworlds Alliance as a whole, and we will see how it goes. We will see. There's so little going on in story-wise in that sector of the inner sphere, which is fine. There's so many hot areas, so many places on fire, and are total wrecks now. Having some quiet corners of the inner sphere in the periphery is not only understandable, it's desired. That's just my opinion anyway. Or I drink coffee at the same time. That's just my opinion anyway on that. I mean, I've never had a big thing for the Outworlds in any particular love or dislove of it. I think I only one short campaign that involved the Outworlds Alliance back in the 30-25 era, and it was a small down on their luck mercenary unit trying to get ahead, and they basically found themselves working for the Alliance and in the extreme frontier, dealing with pirates and crap like that, until they could build up enough of their own forces to get a better contract and move forward. So it is what it is, right? Of course, the Marian Hegemony. I like the Marian Hegemony. I sure the hell wouldn't want to live there, by God, but I like the flavor of it. I mean, it's out there, man. But more importantly, it's a grand example of how you can start out as a bandit kingdom and become something else. So I expect the hegemony to figure out how to get out of the tangled mess they're in, and to benefit from it, and to continue just grow in fits and starts, and slowly become a decent sized periphery nation. I mean, you just they grow. You see the maps that show that. How they end up and how they go, we'll only know when we see it. I mean, minor periphery, the Circus Federation, So, I mean, they don't run afoul of one of the wider ranging clans. I mean, they're just going to keep trickling along doing their thing. The Rim Collection. I know there's a number of people out there that have to wonder, right? Is it possible that we could ever see the Rim worlds reconstitute or something else rise and take their place? Because obviously there's a big glaring, a good chunk of the former Rim Worlds Republic is now Lyran space, or disputed space that was Lyran space. But the other half of the Rim Worlds they're still out there. The worlds are still there. They're still viable. They're still, for the most part, still usable. Some of them probably still inhabited as small, tiny nation states or independents. So the fact is, they're there. It just needs a strong power and a strong will to reel them all in. So the possibility that the Rim Worlds, as the Amorous people knew it, probably will never exist. But the fact is that there's a big open space out there that should have a periphery power in it. Is not lost on me, and it's quite possible that some of these smaller bandit states or startups, like the Franc Reaches, or in this case the Rim Collection, could eventually expand and grow and become a much bigger periphery power at a given time, and the opportunity to do so. You just never know. So another thing that I started noticing in some of these books is the inclusions of animals and bestiary, if you will, animals and vehicles and things that are not your normal stuff. And I'm glad and I'm welcome to. It's great to see that stuff because, at the end of the day, the more we can visually see, the bigger the place gets, the more the immersion into the setting is doable, and it gives us examples of exotic stuff that tend to be missing from a lot of the literature, and obviously from the source books. There's no real reason to include this sort of stuff, but all these worlds were alien to humans when we first sat down, and that they must have native life. If the planet supports human life, it gotta be having its own life too, and it must be in such vast numbers, right? So we got some additional personal equipment, breaching frame, vibro mace, patchwork environmental suit, stasis tube, new weapon trait, the amphibious vehicles. Then we get some support vehicles here. The Majestic class pleasure cruiser. The Rockhound prospector workmet. Cost of living in the near periphery. Rules annex. I always like seeing new stuff like that pops up, new to me anyway, because then I think, how the hell would you play that on the battle map? What sort of role does it take? Periphery States, adventure hooks, all politics is local. Jolly Roger, cutthroat competition, the enemy within, some new BattleTech rules, Terek mounted infantry, otherwise beast riding infantry. The Blue Hawk Protector Combat Support Fighter, the Taurian Tigris Close Patrol Craft, i.e. a gunboat, Princess Class Luxury Liner, the Aqueduct Class Liquid Carrier. I just love this stuff because it expands our existing repertoire, or existing aerospace forces. Especially jump ships and drop ships. The original jump ship guy. I don't know. Do you know if FanPro? I don't know if FanPro or Catalyst ever put out another drop ship, jump ship book. The existing FASA one is the only one. I mean, we see them scattered about. They show up in, they occasionally show up in TROs and other supplements and things like that. But it says in the original, and there's a video on this channel somewhere where I reviewed that book. And I make a couple other videos of me harping about inconsistencies of FTL travel and jump ships versus the economy and things like this. But like I said, it says right in the original book that this is only a sampling of what's out there. And so the most common drop ships and jump ships were included in that book. But they only, by any means, like 40 or 40% of the existing stuff. So there might be 10,000 behemoth class dropships flying around, but there only might be 73 nightmare class dropships flying around. But the fact is that their possibilities are there. So whenever we see things like this crop up, it's great. And then we see things like this. The Snowden, you can live without the name. Snowden Mining Facility is a semi-mobile, self-contained space-based mining and refining station. Once again, at the height of the Star League, at the height of human advancement, before things we try our level best to club ourselves into the Stone Age, there must have been a much wider range of stuff out there that we take for granted or cease to exist. So how many orbital manufacturing facilities were there, and exactly what sorts were there, what types, how big, we'll never know. But the possibilities are that they're there, and these sort of things kind of help me fill in the gaps and help to feed that possibility, or that appease that belief that we should have certain things that aren't in there. So we get some blueprints or record sheets and stuff, shit for some of the stuff that's in here. All good, great stuff. So. The irony is not lost on me. This is a second attempt at me doing this damn video. I reviewed this thing like it's going probably a month ago, and I don't know, something happened, but the damn video started cutting out about 3/4 of the way through it, and I tried to find a way to salvage it, and the salvage turned out I didn't like it, so I thought, well, maybe we just need to redo the damn thing, and hope I get through with it. Anyway, so this is the Major Periphery States, 3067. Right? And I heard somebody not too long ago talking about the Catalyst is looking at coming out with another round of handbooks for the various major factions. So I know as Periphery States, I've got about 4 or 5 books now. I was able to buy a couple off the internet last year, and somebody sent me a PDF. They sent me this PDF, and then they sent me another PDF too. And I think I already did a video on that one. I don't know. But I always enjoy these things that really help add with the flavor. So if you're a new player and you're just showing up and you start buying the current version of these things, you're set. And if you're like many of us, and we're fortunate to have a lot of the old stuff, and then you compare it with the new stuff. But more importantly for us is we're invested. We invest in this. I was watching something, once again, I watch a lot of YouTube, especially when I'm at work, while the truck's doing the work and I'm sitting there waiting for it to fill. There is a, I think it was Home was on one of the talk shows, and this gal that was in Fast was talking about Vin Diesel, and she says Vin Diesel. So I was in his house, and I looked in his closet, and he had a stack of Dungeons and Dragons books this high, and she was waving almost to the ceiling. And then she gets all animated and excited, which kind of surprised the host about this. And she says, do you understand? It says the only people who have that many books is the dungeon master. And she went off on a deal about, the dungeon masters buy all the books. They have to know everything, or want to know everything, or have access to everything. And this means Vin Diesel is a dungeon master. This is one of the reasons he's such a good actor. It's because he was an avid, tabletop role-playing game player for many years when he was growing up, and so many that he was actually a dungeon master, which, like I said, not all dungeon masters buy all the books, and not all players, not all people who never be dungeon master buy the books. I can only speak for myself. I love the books for the sake of the books and the reading and the lore and the bigger picture, as much as the material that they bring to the table and the game itself. I mean, for a big portion, for some of us, that's the enjoyment of any given genre, any given game system. And the more crap there is, the more fluff there is, the more idiots like me will buy, because well, it is what it is until we get to the point where this is an abject lesson of trying to catch up for almost 20 years of lack of purchases. And thank God for, a couple of you guys really stepped out of the ballpark with me on the PDF side of things. And I've been very, very fortunate to stumble across books and stuff. And yet every day, or almost every day, at least a couple times a month, I'm reminded that there's yet other things I have not seen. So recently I posted the review I did for Operation Klondike, and not a very lengthy video, of course. But there's so many videos out there that people did of Operation Klondike based off of the book that, I mean, you really want to see that. They're the ones you want to go watch, and they're very entertaining. But out of this comes a comment that says, well, what did you think of Alexander Krinsky and Jennifer Winston's blah, blah, and I says, well, going by what I read, and I only read Pardo's book on the Clan Wolverine, and of course what's been here and there in the books, and just recently reread the Operation Klondike PDF that I was able to get. I said, I really, this is just my opinion. He says, well, what do they say in this book and that book? And I says, what book? Turns out there's a trilogy. And it's an interesting history by itself. Randall Bills or whatever wrote it, and he wrote the first two books, but they didn't get published right away because the FASA thing fell apart and they rolled over, and at some window there between FASA and WizKids, before FanPro gets involved, there's a German company or something that starts producing BattleTech material, and including the first two novels that Bills had written but had shelved. And then it wasn't till later that they were reintroduced in English with new titles, of course, on the books, and that Mr. Bills went and wrote the third book in the series to finish the book up. So it dealt with the arrival, the SLDF to where the Pentagon worlds, and then the fall apart, and then the second Exodus, and then the introduction of the clans to the homeworlds. I mean, so there's 3 novels out there, which I don't own, I haven't read. So last night I went back to that Humble Bumble, hoping maybe in one of the 60-odd novels in there was these 3, but sadly they're not. Kind of tight on money right now, so I just have to add those books to my wish list of books I hope to read someday, because I haven't even tried looking up if I can even get copies of them, because once again, some things you can get, some things you can't get. I'll have to go to CGL and see if they got PDF versions of them, because I'm not a big, like I said, if you listen to my channel, my rant and bitch all the time, I'm not a big fan of PDFs, but I've managed to make them work. And there's a couple novels in that series that Humble Mumble bundle that I got that I don't have and I want to read. I printed the first one out at work, and it's gonna be this damn big and about yay damn thick. So I gotta bind it up. I got a small stack of shit out there on my shelves that I need to get bound up. I'm kind of hoping to do some of that this weekend. I got a lot of things I want to do. It's an extended weekend for me. Hopefully get some of that done. Hopefully. Anyway. It's a good one. It's worth having, worth reading. Just saying. You guys have yourself a great weekend. Till next time.